So if you have a positive acceleration on an acceleration versus time graph, how can that look on a velocity versus time graph? I have many options for how a velocity versus time graph can look like. It could look like this, or this, or this, or this, or this. Okay, so if I have a positive acceleration, any of these velocity versus time graphs should represent that the object has a positive acceleration. So all of these lines are pointed upwards and to the right, or if you want to be fancy, you can say they have positive slopes. They all have a positive acceleration. So these are all different velocity versus time graphs, but they all have a positive acceleration. So it doesn't matter where the velocity versus time graph starts, all of these are going to have a positive acceleration. Now, what about on a position versus time graph? How does a positive acceleration translate to a position versus time graph? Well, it could look like this. It could look like this. It could look like this. Okay? If an object has a positive acceleration on a position versus time graph, first, the line is going to be curvy, and the line is also going to curve upward like a smiley face. So if on a position versus time graph you see like a smiley face or half a smiley face, no matter where it starts, that means that the object has a positive acceleration. Alright, now what if my object has a negative acceleration? How does that look on velocity and a position versus time graph? Well, if you have a negative acceleration, again, you have many options for how a velocity versus time graph for that object's motion is going to look. If an object has a negative acceleration, you could have many different velocity versus time graphs that all represent having a negative acceleration. Like this one, or this one, or this one, or this one, or this one. All of these velocity versus time graphs represent having a negative acceleration. So on a velocity versus time graph, if you see a diagonal line pointed downwards, or having a negative slope, as you could call it in math, then all of these represent having a negative acceleration. No matter where it starts on that velocity versus time graph, they all represent having negative acceleration. These are all different graphs. I'm not saying these are the same graphs. I'm just saying that the object in each of these graphs would have a negative acceleration. Now, on a position versus time graph, an object that has a negative acceleration, their position versus time graph might look something like this, or this, or maybe like this. Okay, so on a position versus time graph, if you see basically like a sad face, like a frowny face, so a curvy line has to be curvy, and like a sad face, so curved like downward, that represents having a negative acceleration. So these are three different position versus time graphs, but they all represent having a negative acceleration.